In today's world, cybersecurity isn't just an IT issue, it's a business risk, a leadership responsibility, and a strategic imperative. On this podcast, we cut through the noise to discuss real threats, real incidents, and real solutions with the leaders shaping cybersecurity, data privacy, and digital resilience. If you're responsible for protecting systems, managing risk, or guiding your organization through digital transformation, this show is for you because cybersecurity isn't optional, it's foundational. Welcome to Secur IT, where we focus on cybersecurity, their tools, in addition to which, how leaders run businesses securely. Today's conversation is for board members, CEOs, and executives who know that cybersecurity matters, but the struggle to translate it into business strategy, accountability, and resilience. My guest today, George Tsantes, partner at Newport LLC. George has spent decades advising boards and C-suites on cybersecurity, digital transformation, and business risk. He's a former Accenture partner, EY principal, and if that's not enough, ladies and gentlemen, co-author of Cyber Tax, Managing the Risk and Results, a book written specifically to help boards govern cybersecurity effectively. George, welcome to Secur IT.
Thank you very much.
George, I want to set the tone of the conversation for our listeners who are mainly CEOs, CISOs, CTOs. Also, we'll often find students on cybersecurity who are looking to form careers. And I wanted to set the tone for this with a few rapid fire questions if you're ready.
Absolutely.
Cybersecurity in one word, prevention or resilience?
It's vigilance, is what I would say.
The biggest mistake boards make about cyber risk?
Is not quantifying it as a normal business problem with metrics and goals that should be measured and monitored.
The first question every board should ask after a cyber incident
is, let's not make that same mistake again. Let's make new mistakes.
Oh, love it. Most dangerous phase in boardrooms. We haven't had an incident yet.
Then they're naive and they've had incidents, they just haven't discovered them.
You're a wise man, George. Finish this sentence. Cyber resilience is achieved when? Or in this case, cyber vigilance is achieved when?
Well, it's just a continuing journey, right? So it particularly as we're adding new technologies, whether it be AI, whether it be the Internet of Things, vigilance is growing, must grow and expand because the surface area of attack is expanding.
Well done. That sets a tone for the conversation. Let's switch off the fasten seatbelt sign, get you the virtual mimosa, and it's a nice Friday afternoon here in Los Angeles. So let's have a chat, George. You worked with boards across financial services, technology. When you walk into a boardroom, how do you reframe cybersecurity so it's understood as a business issue and not a technical one? What kind of language resonates with non-technical directors?
Well, I think the first thing they need to understand is, unlike every other business problem, is that it can't be solved. You could spend infinity on cybersecurity and you still have the issue. So really understanding what needs to be protected and how to focus resources and how to measure that protection is working and achieving the goal of protecting the most valuable assets for that organization, wherever they might be. Secondly, again, I said before, you want to measure it and make new mistakes, or if it's the same mistake is made, did I catch it sooner? Did I solve that sooner to where hopefully I catch it even before any damage is done? But you're gonna be adding new people, new technologies, new business partners, new connections. So there are going to be new mistakes, and you need to uh, be ready for that. And again, work vigilantly to anticipate those, and those that can't be anticipated to discover them and close them down as quickly as possible. Uh, the other thing I see sometimes in boards is they will get a cybersecurity expert, and sometimes then there's a conversation between that expert and uh, the the team, the technology team, the cyber team at the company, and it devolves into a very geeky conversation that leaves the rest of the board members out. So it's important to keep it at a level where we're focused on the business aspects, the things that we can measure, the things that a board should guide and govern, and demand accountability for.
So it's a balance between not having board members glaze over with technical jargon, yet at the same time making sure that we're maintaining vigilance, being
Mhm.
the code word for today's conversation. So, in your work, you often talk about protecting what matters most, the crown
Yes.
jewels. You refer to them as the crown jewels. How should boards think about identifying their crown jewels in business terms rather than IT assets?
So they need to certainly focus on what drives revenue, what keeps revenue flowing, and what keeps customers coming back, et cetera. And they need to make sure that the executive team and then on down are have the same list of things. So I often do an exercise where I'll talk to the C-suite and ask them to write down the top 10 things that need protection, and you'd be surprised how many times those are different lists, right? And so we need to pull that together to make sure everybody's on the same page. That list is going to going to change and grow over time as the business changes and evolves, as technology changes. But we want to make sure we're focused on those things that need the most protection, and focus on those, and be aligned on the investments we're going to make and how we're going to monitor that those investments are working.
I like that alignment.
Hmm. Yeah, so that's certainly key. The other thing I've done when I talk to boards is we'll do sort of a investigation just on things that are available on the public domain and the internet, and show them how they could be compromised, right? Whether they have a child in school, or I could create an event that there's a lockdown at the school. Click this link to get there. You'd be surprised how many board members have speeding tickets, and so sending them showing them an email with a link saying, "Hey, if you don't pay these tickets, your license is going to be revoked." Those sorts of things, but getting them showing them how it's easy to trick people and understand how they need to be vigilant, and how that translates, the sort of the personal vigilance translates to the posture they're trying to drive at the organization that they're guiding.
And as you continue this journey of leadership in cybersecurity in
Hmm.
boardrooms, boards are increasingly told that they're accountable for cybersecurity, but many don't know what good oversight looks like. From your perspective, what are boards doing wrong? It may not be wrong, but different, right? When it comes to cybersecurity governance.
Well, so not necessarily doing it wrong, but you tend to find a lot of CISOs and tech people who speak in tech terms as opposed to business terms, and so getting that translation layer, I call it a chasm of translation. They both need to work together to get a common language where they can understand the business impact uh, of what's going on, how to protect it, and again, how to measure it. If you don't measure things and don't demand accountability, you're not going to get good results. So I think that's the key. I think the second thing is uh, for the board uh, to drive a sort of mentality that when we're expanding the business, when we're acquiring a company, when we're offering new services, that cybersecurity is part of the due diligence going into it and not inspected in later. I think that's vital today, and to make sure that you are protecting the assets even as you try and grow and expand and drive revenue, drive shareholder value.
I'm enjoying the direction of this conversation. We've talked about alignment, we've talked
Mhm.
about identifying the crown jewels. One thing that I found compelling in your material, George, is this idea of a meta enterprise.
Yes.
The reality that cyber risk extends far beyond the four walls of a company. How should boards think about third parties, suppliers, advisors, even, you know, to your point about traffic tickets, personal
Hmm.
digital exposure of executives. Where do boards underestimate this exposure the most?
I think they're focused on their business and what drives, revenue, growth, et cetera. But most businesses have, certainly connections with service providers, or product providers, certainly with customers, of course. And so that meta enterprise, everywhere I touch, everything I'm connected to, every time I add new devices to the network or capabilities, is you're again increasing the surface area of risk. And so it's extremely important that you look at those connections, you monitor those, you govern those, uh, where those are really critical. You do your own inspections and making sure that they're living up to what is required and necessary to be your business partner, right? And making sure they're vigilant of that it's not just on the paper or slideware or whatever, but you're verifying that and doing it in a way that you're protecting, your organization. And then again, I think as you look at your employees and things, it's just quite important that everybody is vigilant. The biggest team in any organization is the cybersecurity team because everybody's on it, right? So anybody can destroy your cyber posture, clicking the wrong thing, a link that comes in or whatever, and just being very vigilant about that. I think now with AI, the best use of AI in cyber is the ability to monitor behavior of the organization and look for anomalies in that behavior. I think that is vital. Think about it as, how credit card companies have been doing this a long time, right? If I go to spend somewhere that's out of my pattern, they're going to flag it. The same thing with the behavior and patterns within your organization. You want to make sure you're monitoring those and triggering um, investigation or notices when those patterns are violated.
I like that. If a board could ask only three cybersecurity questions quarter after quarter, what would those questions be?
So it's again, are we making new mistakes or the same mistakes? Because if we're making the same mistakes, then we've got a fundamental problem. That is, to me, the number one issue there. Uh, the second is, are we monitoring uh, and protecting the most critical assets, and how do I know that? So, how is that working, and what metrics are you presenting to me so I can be confident that you're actually doing what you say you're doing with that. Uh, and the third is, what should we be spending more on? And just as important, what should we be spending less on? Okay, so if I'm going to spend more on something, I need to take and spend less somewhere else. And so, how do I rebalance that, and so that we are again focusing on protecting the right assets with the right amount of effort and assets to keep that vigilant and take away from other places that maybe we can spend less, or things that are commodities where we should renegotiate with the vendor to get commodity pricing for what used to be a premium service.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. To that point, right? One of my favorite slides in your presentation is, are we making the same mistakes or are we making new mistakes? Because I've had the advantage of looking at your presentation.
Mm-hmm.
And you've also asked, are we catching them sooner, right?
Yes.
Um, Speaking of metrics, which you just alluded to,
Mm-hmm.
um, when we think about metrics, and then at one end, the other extreme is paralysis by analysis. So, how should
Yes.
boards think about metrics in cybersecurity without falling into vanity dashboards?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think they need to focus on what what are you present, what are you showing me as evidence that you're protecting those most critical assets, and how good are we at doing that, and how can we do that more efficiently? And so I think that's the best way for them to look at it, as opposed to I've seen presentations where this many pings at the firewall we capture. Who cares about that, right? What I want to know is, I have assets, are they being protected? How are we doing that? And when something does happen, which it will, what have we done to mitigate that in a way that it won't happen again? It's simple, right? It's not like any other. It's like other business processes. If you have a manufacturing plant that where the machines break down, you focus on that and make sure you're doing the right maintenance, etc. So it's not too different from that. The other thing I think um, that the cyber team and the technology team need to educate the board on, particularly in regulated industries, is how much time is spent proving cybersecurity versus doing cybersecurity. You'd be surprised at the amount of effort in regulated industries that it takes to prove versus doing. And so, you know, a a technology team, if they can make that process more efficient and better, they then can free up resources to on the doing versus the proving. And in most organizations, I've found very few that were very efficient in the proving part, but it can be done. I've seen it done before, and with a little focus and someone who's in charge of that part of the program, and making sure that that's efficient, as opposed to just doing a fire drill every time the regulators come by, or a key vendor is doing an assessment.
There's no doubt cybersecurity governance is a ballet with micro adjustments constantly at board levels as we go forward,
Mm-hmm.
right? And throughout this conversation,
Mm-hmm.
from crown jewels to metrics, to understanding revenue generation, but now you've raised a very powerful distinction. Um, Doing cybersecurity versus proving cybersecurity. And
Yes.
and in my own selfish interest, I do want to gently transition into resilience.
Mm-hmm.
But continuing on this doing versus proving, how do leaders strike the right balance between real protection and compliance theater? Right? At what point does measurement actually improve resilience instead of just reporting?
Yeah, again, I think you need to, part of it is kind of helping to coach the people doing the oversight or the regulation, and because some of them come in and they have a menu, right? And if you're not doing it this way, then they're going to ding you, versus educating them on, here's what we're doing to solve that particular issue, and this is why it's better than what's on your piece of paper there, as you come in. Uh, I think the second thing is, where you can push back on some of uh, these things that these inquiries, or to try and get that into a comprehensive report that you can issue to multiple groups uh, that that make that happen. And then finally, like I said, having someone who's in charge of that, who is working and has a relationship with these evaluators, who can provide that give and take, and kind of head off sometimes the issues or the asks that are unwarranted or seem unreasonable when you're trying to do cybersecurity, right? And so it's an all of the above thing, but again, you've got to put focus on it. And most organizations I found don't have someone who's focused on that issue, and that can be 10, 20, even 20% of your hours, right? And why not reduce that to 10 or 5?
Right. And to clarify, you're saying that they don't necessarily have a person focused on that issue. They may have a person, but not
Yeah.
focused on that issue. So,
Right, or they'll just say, "You're not so busy. You take this one."
right.
Exactly. Versus someone, "This is my domain," and and again, because I do this over and over, I get relationships, so I can have a better give and take with those that are evaluating me.
I talk about a lot about resilience, something you and I did in our prep
Hmm.
call as well,
Sure.
and we're echoing each other. The assumption that incidents will happen. And the real question is how quickly and calmly an organization responds. You've guided companies through real cyber incidents from a board
Hmm.
perspective. What does good incident readiness actually look like, right? And if that question is too vague, let me drill down a little bit. Many response plans look good on paper, but they actually fail in practice.
Of
What
course.
are what are some of the most common gaps that you've seen when plans are tested, especially around communication, decision making, business continuity?
Yeah. So I think one failure I've seen often is you have a team designated for the response, but you haven't focused on the backfill for their day jobs, right? So the operations need to keep going. And so to make sure that not only do you have the team in place to do the response and mitigation and reporting, communication, all that stuff, but secondly, to make sure you can backfill so that business can, have can operate and not be too disrupted as you move it forward. In the communications plan, again, it's in before anything happens, making sure that you have an agreement from top to bottom on who gets called first, who gets woken up in the middle of the night, for example, who doesn't. But some people get offended because they weren't on that first call. But you got to have a plan, explain which tier of communication you're on and why, uh, and uh, and then follow that. I think that's key. Uh, Obviously, you need to have not just your own internal resources organized, but who you're going to call in to help with the investigation, the which law firm you're going to call in, so that you can keep the communications privileged, that sort of thing. And then again, with regulated industries, making sure that you have someone who is going to communicate with the regulators, particularly in I've worked with companies who've had breaches that are significant and they were regulated, and you've got state attorney generals who want to be governor and they don't mind making an example of you. So you want to make sure you get ahead of that, uh, and uh, and just again, be vigilant about that. So that's those are the key points I think, that you want. But you need to have, again, a law firm on retainer. You need to have an investigative team on retainer, and then you need to have a plan for the backfill of your key resources who are going to then be on that response team and dedicated to that. Yeah.
Okay. So, George, you've been there. You've seen it pre-practice, pre-incident. You've guided boards
Mhm.
through the practice. Um, I want a war story. How does it look like in the room, in the boardroom, after a cyber incident? You've got all types, all personalities sitting in the boardroom.
Yeah.
Some want a quick fix, some have pause. There's right brain, left brain. The introverts, the extroverts. Um, Entertain us. How does it look like in a boardroom after a cyber incident?
Well, certainly there are a lot of questions. Sometimes the questions are about the people that the people in charge at the organization. Were they doing the right things? Uh, are they capable of doing what they're supposed to be doing? Um, I remember at this one board meeting, um, and one of the board members looked at me and said, um, "Can you promise that this won't happen again?" And I looked at her and I said, "No, I can promise it will happen again, but we need to catch it sooner."
Right.
Uh, and then there was another board meeting uh, where I was talking about threat actors and how they behave and this, that, the other thing. And 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 one board member said, "You act like they're your friends." I said, "They're not my friends, but I need to know how they behave so I can better advise you and others to on how to protect yourself." So uh, it's again, it's the only problem. I said it before, but where a board member can't throw money or people at it and it's solved, right? Every other business problem you can solve it. This is one that's contiguous, and so getting their mind wrapped around that is not easy, but it's important to do that so you can build that trust and have them understand this is a very different business problem than the others that they advise on. And so it takes some education to do that. I like doing board educations as well and talking to them about threat actors, about what's going on, about the surface area of attack, and that's where I said I try and weave in how I would attack them personally, and trick them into clicking on something that would then harm the the cybersecurity posture of wherever they are, and those things seem to help and get that done. But almost always they ask the employees to leave the room and they want an assessment of the team they have.
And speaking of which, I have to share this anecdote with you. Having run a cybersecurity company for 33 years, um, I'm sitting a few years back with the CISO of a large California educational system, and
Hmm.
Aurora, the company that I led and founded, has worked with them for a few years. My team's presenting the annual cybersecurity report, and he's just sitting next to me. We were in a little bit of a relaxed mood, but we know that there's an accountability coming through, and he looks at me, and I will remember this moment forever, George. On the screen is a RAG report, right? It's red, amber, green on all these 40 items. And he looks at me and he's like, "Look, Philip, we've spent millions of dollars in the last 3 years. Why do I still have reds on my list?"
Hmm.
Which goes to your point, right? It's even worse than buying a boat. It's not only it's a hole in the water, we've got to keep doing this.
Yes.
No,
No, I have a
please.
race car, so I get the boat analogy. Yeah.
If you could give, just to wrap this segment up, if you could give boards one uncomfortable truth about cybersecurity incidents, what would it be?
I think they're going to happen. They're going to continue to happen, and you need to be organized around that premise. It's just that simple.
So
So
true.
if you're not organized for that, you're in big trouble.
Very true. Let's talk a little bit about bringing the boardroom, and the tech team into alignment. And you frequently describe, a communication chasm between
Hmm.
board CEOs and technical teams.
Yes.
Um, just pardon my innocence here, or allow me to be a little naive as I ask this question. Why does this gap persist? What does it take to effectively close this gap? Um, is it more a leadership problem or a translation problem?
I think it's more of a focus problem for the tech team. So the most important thing I can do as a CISO or on that team or even on the tech team is understanding how the company makes money, how information flows, and where those valuable assets are. I mean, and I don't want to throw stones, but I see a lot of companies hiring ex government cybersecurity people, and they're great at understanding the threat actors. They're great at understanding how to protect, assets of the government and the military. But I can learn how to I can learn about threat actors much faster than I can learn how a trade flows through a bank, from front office to middle office to back office and all the connections that happen. So my best advice, no matter what industry you're in, could be manufacturing, could be financial services, is learn about the business, understand how that business flows and how it does, and that's going to make you more valuable for proactive security. So for being able to look at new projects, look at new software, and understand how you can protect it from the front end, as opposed to waiting to inspect it in after some incident or something. So my best advice is learn how your business works, and that'll serve you well.
Okay. Um, I'm going to ask you for a cheat sheet on behalf of our listeners. What advice would you give CISOs, technology leaders, team leaders who are technically strong, no doubt, but struggle to influence board level decisions?
So I think one, you need to be able to speak in business terms, and secondly, you need to do a little research about the board members, understand what drives them, and try and describe your challenges and your solutions in a context they would understand, uh, from their own business, from their own hobbies, whatever it turns out to be, but put it in a context that they can understand. I think is the and speak their language, as opposed to um, uh, trying to educate them on your language, because they're never going to get it. You need to reach out to them and do that. And I think if you do that, yeah, you'll get a better relationship with them, and just a stronger communication channel.
I like that. It's the old adage, right? You look at it from your customer's point of view, and in this case, the
Yeah,
board is your customer.
yeah.
So,
Just like you need to look at your company through the eyes of a threat actor, right? And
right,
put yourself in their position, and what's valuable. Why would I want that? Why would I try and harm you?
yeah,
Yeah.
wise words. So you briefly alluded to owning a race car, and it now all makes sense. You open your bio with a Mario Andretti quote: "If everything
Yeah,
seems under control, you're just not going fast enough."
that's correct.
How do boards reconcile the need for speed and innovation with the need for control and resilience or vigilance?
Yeah. So again, I think the more you can uh, design in for that control, for that resilience, the better off you're going to be. Trying to, figure it out afterwards or wire it in later, it's it's much more expensive. It's much more difficult. So getting the right stakeholders in place to make sure it's resilient, make sure it's secure, as secure as can be at the time, is extremely important. The best way to design something, or the best way, if you're doing an acquisition, on the due diligence of that, don't just look at the numbers, but look at the technology, look at who that target is connected to, et cetera, and make sure that you are, being you're expecting that in from the beginning. It's just that simple.
George, as we were syncing up for this conversation today, we talked about people, right?
Hmm.
And how important people are to
Yeah.
the need and the cause and the solution of cybersecurity. Looking ahead, um, and I should preface this: no conversation is complete nowadays without mentioning AI, right? Those
Hmm.
two much bandied about vowels.
Yeah.
The key here is looking ahead. How should boards evolve their approach to cybersecurity over the next 3 to 5 years? We've got AI, we've got automation, we've got quantum computing,
Hmm.
and geopolitical risk all accelerating.
Right. Yeah. So I again, that's a great question. I don't have all the answers, but I think um, with AI, on the pro side, like I said, you can use it to make sure that you're looking for patterns of behavior that don't align with how the organization should be run. And again, as I talked about before, finding those anomalies early. And I think AI can do a great and does a great job of that. At the same time, AI can be used against you, right, with deep fakes and very, very compelling uh, emails or videos to click on, and then bring in malware to your organization. So it cuts both ways. You mentioned geopolitical, and this is one that's interesting because if you make a country mad at you, uh, what I always say is hate has no ROI, right? Hate is, or the ROI on hate is infinity, right? They'll just keep spending it, versus other threat actors who are looking for economic value and that sort of thing. So, uh, that's why you need to understand the threat actors and their motivations and how you can be prepared to address those, whether it be in your current business or any new ventures or businesses or new geographies that you may want to pursue moving forward. Um, you mentioned quantum computing and I like the Internet of Things. Just again, the surface area of attack is always increasing, right? I mean, even in my own home here, I've probably got 100 things connected to the internet, right? And I'm the only one who lives here, so it the surface area of attack is growing, and it's not going to get smaller.
I'm feeling a bit poetic on a Friday afternoon in California. Hell hath no vengeance, as a threat actor threatened,
Hmm.
right? Or scorned in this case. As we close up this highly informative conversation, no doubt, but this very unique perspective in the 50 plus podcasts we've done, I'm enjoying looking at cybersecurity from a board point of view.
Hmm.
This has been invaluable for me. If you had to leave board members and CEOs with one message about cybersecurity vigilance, as you call it, or cybersecurity resilience is a term that I like to use, not fear based but practical,
Yeah,
what would it be?
I would say just keep focus on what is the most valuable things to protect and make sure you're getting the few vital metrics that indicate that that's happening. And so you have to do that, and that list is going to change, and the metrics may change over time, but making sure that you're both sides are updating that, and that communication channel is open. And like I said, for the tech people, learn how to speak business and learn how to put things in their terms so that that communication channel is effective, smooth, and always open.
Well said. Very well said. George, thank you so much. Um, Ladies and gentlemen, cybersecurity isn't about stopping every attack. That's a fantasy. It's about knowing what matters, governing it intentionally, and recovering faster than your competitors when things go wrong. What today's conversation makes clear is this: Cyber vigilance, cyber resilience is not a technology problem, it's a leadership discipline. It leaves the boardroom, it shows up in strategy, it lives in the boardroom, and it's measured by how calmly and decisively a business responds under pressure. The companies that win are not the ones with the most tools. It'll be the ones that have the clearest priorities, the strongest governance, and the muscle memory to act when it matters most. Hopefully, you found this conversation and this unique perspective of George's as valuable as I have. Stay focused, stay resilient, and above all, stay secure.